You have a colour scheme in mind, but you're not quite sure where to start. Finding it tricky to pick the right kind of paints and tones for your project? Well, don't you worry, myself and Richard Sharpe have got you covered. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. Cheers. Now, I'm sure we've all been there. I have multiple times. You have a colour scheme in mind, you've done your research, you know what the end result will look like. You're just struggling to find the right kind of paints and tones that will get you that end result as you imagine it. In this video, that's exactly what we're going to be covering. And I'm going to be picking a subject matter that is near and dear to my heart and I adore greatly. And that is Major Richard Sharpe. Now, I've painted many iterations of this dashing swashbuckling hero. From my very first version as an inquisitorial warband member of my old Imperial Guard army, all the way to my current paint job for my silver Bayonet warband. I've seen the films, I've read the books, I have pages of reference to flick through, but that's all well and good until you need to put paint on a miniature. So in this guide, I'm going to paint up Richard Sharpe and some chosen men using a range of paints I am not familiar with or have hardly used. In fact, not used at all, apart from like a handful for a dwarf paint guide. That is the Army Painter Warpaint Fanatic stuff, so they're all new to me. Chucking myself in the deep end here, but I know the end result I want to do, and I know I want to time in with existing stuff I've got, so I'm just going to crack out those paints and get a test model painted up, which is going to be Richard Sharpe. Now, as I just alluded to, the first step is going to be the test model. Now, I would argue a test model is the most important part of your painting process. I've stressed this loads to people in the past in the army painting team and when I've done other sort of tuition-based stuff. If you start painting models, it's like a unit, or you start doing an army and you've not got a test model, you might be really lucky and you might find that the colour scheme works really well because in your mind's eye, you've kind of worked it all out and you know roughly what you're doing. But if you make mistakes or you make changes, you've got to do that on everything. You've got to do that on the unit. You've got to like bring them all back to whatever stage it was before you add the next new colour that you've changed your mind or whatever. With a test model, you don't need to worry about it. It's one figure. So all the mistakes you make are on that one figure. All the tweaks that you need to do are on that one figure. And that might be you decide that you're going to use a different wash in the end because you didn't like the effect of that wash. So test models are super key. Another thing to point out as well, you'll notice this, I'm picking Sharpe because it's Sharpe. I'm going to paint Sharpe, but I'm also going to use him as my test model because a fun thing about test models is 9 times out of 10 you find you put more effort into him. Usually, if I'm not familiar with the paints and the models, I will do a back ranker, but my back ranker ends up looking better than my sergeant's. I'm fairly confident that I know I want a green for his jacket, I want flesh for his face, I want red for his sash. So I am going to paint Richard Sharpe. And I imagine I'll probably put a little bit more effort into this test model than I would for the other chosen men. So that's why I'm picking Sharpe, because it'd be rude not to. Now at the moment, as you can see, we are just in the base coat stage. So it's straightforward, just blocking in those colours where we need to. It tends to start thin to start off with, because if I don't like the tone, like the flesh for instance, I can always just swap it out for another colour. It's only a thin coat, but now that I'm happy with it, I'm just gonna have to do a second coat here and there. Green might have been a dodgy choice for like the face and the hair, but actually, because there's so much green jacket there, it kind of made sense really. So all I'm going to do now is just get some of that wash over. Again, this is what I always like to do. It helps identify some details as well. It's in preparation for other things later on, and it makes it nice and tabletop ready. So just get that wash on. I've got given a Red Grass painter handle by Red Grass Games. Thank you very much for sending that through. Never used this before, so I'm also going to use that in this paint guide. It's got loads of interchangeable caps. There's a few other things which I'll probably use in later videos as well. Loads of cool extra gubbins with it. But what I really like is it comes with 4 extra caps, so I can just take those out, swap them with the chosen men as I start going through different models. Disclaimer: I keep forgetting that it spins. So you might notice in the paint guide that from time to time, I'm turning the handle and not the spinny bit because I'm so used to static handles. So do bear that in mind, but it's a really cool, it feels really nice in the hand as well. And I really like the fact I can just take the top off, put another one on with a different model. So really efficient. So thank you, Red Grass Games, for sending that through. Not sponsored, just they kindly sent it and I'm going to use it. So why not? Right, Sharpe, let's get on. Now we've got Sharpe up to a certain point, which is what I would probably call tabletop ready. I'm not going to embellish him with highlights just yet. What I am going to do is I'm happy with the colours I've got so far. So I'm going to get Harris, Hagman and Harper up to the same kind of point. Now Harris and Hagman look nothing, well none of them really do to be fair, but they don't look like they do in the shows. It's just an artistic license. I've got Harris with ginger hair. I've got a guy with I couldn't find the right kind of head, so I've got a guy with a bandana. That's going to be Hagman. I did notice, and someone did mention this in the comments as well, that both, well, certainly Sharpe looks more like Harrison Ford, and I can see that now. I also think that Harper looks more like Carter Burke from Aliens. Don't know why, he just does. So yeah, I'm going to crack on. I'm just going to start painting the rest of the colours on the other Chosen Men, so you're just going to see that happening now. I'm just going to start chucking on colours, and we'll also get those up to a tabletop level as well. There's a few extra differences to the Chosen Men. They've got like some pouches, some canteens. Harper's obviously got his volley gun as well. The other two clearly got their Baker rifles, which is fine. See, I said Baker rifle this time. Just again, picking out those little bits and bobs, their little sword bayonets. There's a couple of things that, again, it's an artistic license. Sometimes you just need a pop of colour. I'm not entirely sure if they need like brass on some of those bits, but I just wanted to add a little bit of colour here and there. I really like doing bright blue canteens on British as well. They do have like a blue. This might be a bit too punchy, but actually once washes are on and stuff, it really does help. Harris, I couldn't quite find in the Fanatic range a perfect sort of like ginger hair kind of tone, so I just made my own. So I just mixed a bit of orange together with a little bit of brown. That worked out really well. And that's a great thing when you're doing like units, you don't have to make sure they've got the exact same hair colour, you can mix and match with that. The other thing as well that I needed to make sure of was they have slightly different trousers because they're swapping them in and out. So I could have given more green trousers if I wanted to, but with these guys, I thought it'd be quite nice just to change up a little bit and give them some grey. Also use the same colour on their bedrolls, on the back of their haversacks as well. Again, I'll need a couple of coats of that because it is going over black. Again, not forgetting to pick out Harper's trousers. I do think they changed a fair bit in the show, but I don't really care. It just helps break up the colour a bit. I mean, at this point, you could have probably sprayed them grey for these guys. Sharpe has got more green on him. These guys, there's a little bit more, I guess, a bit of everything. So it doesn't really matter what colour you spray them. I just went with green. I think these might have been too bright for poor old Hagman. I think he has slightly darker, faded green trousers, but don't care. He swapped them out. This is summer wear, summer trousers. That's what they are. And again, just going over, picking out any like little bits, like, you know, I'm getting some black there just to do the straps on the bedroll. That's the problem with the rifles. There's so much black on them. And again, dousing them in that wash, getting them ready for the tabletop. And then if you wanted to, at this point, base them. I mean, I've got so many figures that are at this kind of point in my armies, it makes sense to get them to this point. Just to quickly break away from painting Sharpe and his Chosen Men, you can see models, or at least models like this, in action. I had the privilege of going and joining the guys from Games Night. They do amazing battle reports, just really fun battle reports. Their angle is having fun and not worrying about the rules mechanics so much. That mechanic is there just to help tell the story. I played a game of Sharpe. It was so much fun. It felt like an episode of Sharpe as well. So it'll be rude not to just like highlight their channel whilst I'm talking and painting Sharpe related stuff here anyway. So do go and check that out. And yeah, I got to use a load of my 95th rifle, some British, and fought against some French. Thank you, Lewis and Ben, for hosting me. You were amazing, and it was a great day. So we're now going to move on to the next step stage of Sean Bean, Sharpe, Richard Sharpe. Because I'm not really familiar with the tones in this range of Fanatic paints, I am just working my way through. The thing you need to bear in mind as well when you are painting, sometimes it starts off a lot lighter when you first apply it, and then as it dries, it gets a bit darker. So there is that you've got to bear in mind when you are doing your tests and you are painting your figures, that sometimes the colour when it initially goes on is going to be a lot brighter than after it's dried. And I was actually quite happy with this green. It is a bit brighter than normal, and I do mention this later on that, you know, rifles tend to have quite dark green, but actually when it comes to miniatures, you want them to pop out a bit more. Look at that, perfectly formed butt. Nice one, Richard. So yeah, just picking out some of the folds of the cloth. Again, because it's 28mm Napoleonics, I don't tend to go too mad with everything. Just picking out the things that seem a bit raised up here and there. I don't stress it too much. Now, when I was doing his hand, I did get a little bit on his cavalry sword, a little bit of flesh by accident. That's fine. I just used a brush that was clean, or clean the one that you've got, and then just wipe off any excess. You can always touch it back up with some silver after if you need to. Again, in this next step stage, my first step is always doing the tidy up. So that's just getting those base colours, reapplying them for an extra sort of level of depth. So yeah, you just work your way around doing that before you start doing any highlighting. It's a nice, easy way of getting your first initial highlight in there without going too bright or getting too stressed out, getting, oh, what colour do I do now for my highlights? Just use your base coat because that shade's knocked it back already, so you can use it again and get some nice, subtle tones from it. I think I might have gone a bit too blonde with Sharpe, but sod it, it looks fine. Again, going around the rope and his sash, rope tassels, that's the probably more appropriate term. I mean, it looks a bit like rope. It's like the things at the side of curtains. Don't actually know what they're called. Cords, that's it, I know what they're called, cords. At this point I decided I thought the green looked a bit too stark in places, so I wanted to knock it back. So I found a relevant speed paint, a nice green tone, thinned it down with the medium that comes in the set, and just applied it as like a very, very thin sort of wash, glaze all over it. And that knocked it back a little bit and kind of put it back into that sort of dark green kind of tone as well. And I kept that at the side because I thought I might need that later on for maybe the Chosen Men. But it also made the cloth dry really matte. So the green previously was a little bit satiny, and that made the cloth dry really matte. So I was quite chuffed with that result as well. So this was a bit of a test as I was doing it. You see here, getting a bit of that skin tone on there because I've got that shade, the dark tone previously. It's just add a little bit more depth around where the eye sockets are as well. So there we are. I'm quite happy with this point. I've done the tidy up stage. So what I'm going to do now is move on to some more highlighting. I mean, you could say the tidy up stage is probably part of tabletop if you wanted it to be. It's up to you. So I was experimenting with greens here. Again, this is still test model. I'm still working colours out, still trying to figure out if I like it. I was quite chuffed with this green. It made it look a little bit faded because Sharpe's tunic and trousers are quite battered and very, very worn. So yeah, I was just working my way around, doing a little bit of jaggedy highlighting as well because I like doing that. It makes the cloth look a bit tatty. And again, because I've got that speed paint that I thinned down if I wasn't happy or if it was just too much, I could always coat that back over if I needed to knock it back a bit. But I was actually quite happy with the end result. Again, picking out those perfectly formed butt cheeks of Richard Sharpe there. Cloth can be a nightmare sometimes when you're trying to get the folds right, but don't let it bother you, just lay it if you need to. Also, just to make his trousers feel a little bit more worn and battered, I kind of used that green as the highlight, really thinned it down and just applied it as a bit of a wash and a glaze just around the base of his trousers near his boots, and then did that glaze again. I did think the highlights were a bit too stark here, so I decided to put a bit of a wash of that mix that I made. And again, I'll do this all at the end when I do the Chosen Men. And there we are. That is Sharpe done, test model ready. Let's move on to the Chosen Men. So following the same process, really what I'm going to do here is just go through the same stages I did with Richard Sharpe. So picking out the green, using that as like my tidy up stage. Again, just working, finding those folds that really do stand out. I'll never quite be Kevin Dallimore when it comes to painting historical miniatures because he has a really nice way of doing it. But it works for me, I'm happy with it, and it picks out all the folds of the cloth. Again, just working my way around trousers, picking out some of those as well. Just subtle tidy up stages here and there. Again, don't forget Hagman's green trousers. I mean, this is ugly stage. Like, look at his face. Look how ugly he looks. But that's fine. I'm happy with this because I'll be tying him up in a minute or two. I mean, you don't have to if you're happy with them as they are. Crack on. Just going to use that same beige for the pouch just to make it stand out a bit more. And again, the other thing, you know, it's quite dirty in places because that dark tone. I kind of like that because it kind of gives them that gritty, dirty kind of look as well, that you'd expect from a rifleman. And then just a couple of highlights. In some places, I'll do like a nice little line overs. I'll make it a bit jaggedy so it looks a bit frayed and worn. Not going to do everything really because, but you can do. Be there forever, especially if you've got like 20 or 30 of these guys to do. But it does help that black stand out a little bit more, especially when you've got all the other straps, pouches, etc. around, so it just helps break up a little bit. And then yeah, just tying up the faces. There he is, Carl Burke. Just going to join some badass Marines in space and fight some aliens with his volley gun. Just picking out some of those edges now on the trousers. Again, it's the same grey, it just looks slightly lighter because obviously the trousers got washed, so it knocked it down a bit, which I really like because it saves having to find a tone that's like slightly lighter. And then I'm just going to grab that Flesh speed paint, which is now my replacement for Guilliman Flesh. In fact, it feels like Guilliman Flesh, and I love Guilliman Flesh, so that's perfect. And then yeah, just tighten up the face, the lips. It's so easy to forget, these guys are really small in reality. So picking out the knuckles, the nose, etc. is hard. And of course, can't have Patrick Harper with a bit of stubble. Did a little bit on Sharpe as well at one point. Wasn't too sure if I liked it, but definitely works for Pat Harper / Carter Burke. And of course around the hairline as well, if you've got a bit of flesh in there. I also like to do it in places if I find my folds have lost a bit of their depth or whatever, or you just need to have a bit of a divide between one texture to the next. And of course get those highlights on. Now obviously here you can see there's a lot of Harper being done, but I did do the same thing on the other guys as well. This bit is tricky, it's quite thin down, but again, if you make mistakes you can easily tidy up. It really does help the chosen men, the rifles, pop out in their own because they do have that nice white piping on the black facings, but it just takes a little bit of time and effort to get that right, and a steady hand, and sometimes I wobbled quite a bit. The lapels was a little bit of artistic license because that little pom-pom on the end is meant to be black, but it just disappeared a bit, so I just made it white and then tied up if I needed to. And now sergeant stripes. So you could sit and do 3 little chevrons. I tend to do like a big block, like a big chunky chevron, and then just do a couple of little chevrons in it. Technically, I should have done this in the base coat stage, like I have mentioned in previous videos. So that was my bad for not doing that, because I'd forgotten to make him at this point a sergeant. So yeah, didn't require that much tidying up, but yeah, I'd recommend when you're doing it yourself, doing the base coat stage. Don't do a peach here. Oops, that was a bit too thick. And then we're going to move on to basing. Muddy ground is great. I like wet ground as well, but that's too glossy. I don't want it to be like too muddy and wet. So I went with muddy ground. Really, really nice basing material. I tend to splodge quite a lot on, like front and back, like you can see here on Sharpe. And then I just apply a fair bit of water to my brush. 2 reasons. One, it thins down the paint that's on there, and I can easily get around the feet. So I'll get myself like a bit of a border, if you like, around those feet. I get a bit of a border around them, and then I can just manipulate that texture around, and then just place it where I need to. Once it's dry, I'm going to do some dry brushing. Using tissue here. I've used tissue many years. I know some people in the comments will say that's wrong. It's fine, you can use whatever you want. I do apologise for the state of my fingers there. I did do some spraying, so I've got black finger. Now here, I'm going to do a little bit of weathering around the boots as well. It's quite nice. I tend to get the same colour I've used for the dry brush on the base. I just stab it on. You can also thin it down, which is quite nice. Heavily thin it down if you need to, and then apply it so it's caked inside the folds of the cloth as well. And then if you need to, a bit like on Sharpe, just add a little bit more shape to the boots because they might have been lost a little bit with that dry brush and that weathering. Just get some black and then put it on. Just helps the feet stand out a bit. And then, of course, I need to prepare my model for some base rimming. So I just repositioned him on the painting handle. And it's a case of going around with a colour that you like to use for your base rims. Now, I did make a mistake here. Got a bit of water on my brush to try and wipe it off, but actually, you know, I didn't stress out about it too much, just let it dry and then did a little dry brush over the edge a bit as well. I like to use super glue when I'm doing my static grass. I find it stays on better. Some people prefer PVA, I like super glue. Just do a couple of dollops here and there, drop it into the tub, move it round, give him a little smack on the bottom, or Lizzie's face, because it is a penny. If I've got any excess I don't like, just get some tweezers, pull it off. And of course, wipe the rim if you need to with your finger. Of course, you might get a little bit of glue on there or the extra little bit of static grass. And there we are, they are based. With the miniatures base to match my other silver bayonet soldiers, they're now ready to take down all manner of evil and ne'er-do-wells. There we are, Sharpe and his chosen men are done. I'm happy enough with them. They're up to the next step stage. The most important thing I think you'll find from doing any kind of test model is finding those efficiencies in that one figure. You've painted it from start to finish, and at the end of the process, you might find that actually you might want to change the undercoat, or you might want to do an all-over wash at a later point because you've added some other colours after. So test models are really key, not just for getting the colours placed down and knowing what paints to use, but also to find out where you can speed things along as well. In this guide, I'd already decided I was going to use green spray, but if I had loads of grey trousers and only a green jacket, then you might find actually spraying them grey might be easier, and then just pick out the green jacket because you've got all the black, you've got all the grey. That probably works better with a grey undercoat. But that's just chucking out there for different colour schemes if you're doing Brunswickers or whatever, or Venturian Nobles, yes. But yeah, so test models are key for finding those efficiencies. So I'm just going to throw this out there. Obviously, there's a lot of historical nerds like myself out there probably watching this. Anyone that's a 95th Rifle fan or a Sharpe fan, you're probably going to observe and say, Peachy, your green's quite bright. It is quite bright. I wanted to punch that colour out a little bit because the downside to the 95th Rifle colour scheme, if you're going to do it historically accurate, is it's quite dark. It becomes a shapeless mass because you've got black belts and straps, a black haversack, a black shako, dark brown weapon furniture, horns, straps, boots. It's all just very dark. And that's the downside sometimes when you try and mimic things historically, is they end up looking, well, quite real, but then from a distance, like an arm's length, when you play on the tabletop, you can't tell what's what. It's just a shapeless mass. So usually when I'm doing my painting, certainly historical stuff, I like to punch the colour out a little bit because then you can spot it from a distance. So yes, the green jackets in this are a bit brighter than probably historically accurate, but I don't care about that because they look cool. Although this video is aimed at colour schemes that are already, you know what you want to do with it. You already know you're going to be painting the jackets green. You already know you're going to be picking out browns here, fleshes there, whatever. You're just not sure on the colours to actually use. Later on down the line, I will be doing a video on about creating and planning colour schemes from scratch. So using the colour wheel, you want to just make up your own colours. So keep an eye out for that later on down the line. As always, a massive thank you to my patrons. Without you, this channel wouldn't exist. And also I won't get the opportunity to just paint Sharpe, and you've been nagging at me to do it for a while anyway, so why not? And this is one of many Sharpe videos to come in the future. It's not all going to be just painting Sharpe in a green jacket. I mean, I'll probably do one as a Venturian Noble. I'm probably going to do a video on every Sean Bean in every movie. Maybe like a car park fight version of Sean Bean in every movie. That would be fun. Yeah, I might do that. But yeah, there's going to be lots of more Napoleonic related content. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And of course, I can't leave this video without some wise words from Richard Sharpe himself. And that is, do you know what makes a good soldier? The ability to fire 3 rounds a minute in any weather, except when winter's coming. Oh, that's a different documentary. Yeah, that's a different one. The first part's right. I don't know about the last part. Bye. Now, I'm sure we've all been there. I certainly have on Sean Bean. How dare you leave? Oh, I have to pull him back up again now. I'm trying to escape. You can't escape. You're not allowed to leave until you've done your job. Hardly used any apart from a handful in a dwarf paint. Richard Sharpe is doing my head in now. He keeps trying to leave, and I don't know why he's doing it. I'm just going to be back in a second and put him back in his place because he needs putting back in his place. Richard, stand still. I know you can fire 3 shots a minute, but clearly you can't stand, can you? As always, thank you very much for watching. And in the wise words of Sharpe Bean, the wise words of Sharpe Bean.